And here's an interesting fact. We have 6,200 thoughts a day. And 5,000 of them or more are negative or repetitive. And I don't know what that adds up to. I think let me do some quick math in my brain. That's 80% or negative, 150,000 negative thoughts a month. And I think it's 1.8 million, if I did my math right, negative thoughts a year. Um, that's destructive, right? That's destructive. So learning to catch those things, and when you have those, and put a tick mark next to it if it's repetitive. And then what you start recognizing is this pattern. If you are disciplined enough to do that for a month or more, so that you just begin to instantly recognize those things, then you're on the way to changing the habits and those thoughts and being able to have better conversations with yourself.
Rhett, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Absolutely delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Man, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. We're going to have a fun conversation. I know that for
Absolutely.
a fact.
I no doubt. Yeah, I've really enjoyed getting to know you off air. So looking forward to this conversation. Look, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Rhett, to kick off the show, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
That's a great question. And if you'd asked me that probably 10 or 15 years ago when I was in the middle of growing, my businesses and trying to do that thing, which was grow and get bigger and make more money and, sell more product, I probably wouldn't have had a great answer. But as I've gotten older and maybe a little bit wiser, and actually, my business now is really to help people do that. I think scaling means for me, particularly scaling with purpose means growing, without losing your soul. I think it's building a business that gets bigger and better at the same time, better decisions, healthier leaders, stronger teams, purpose that shows up in how you treat people, how you make, how you make trade-offs, how you make deals, how you lead, how you show up when things are hard. I think growth without purpose creates a burnout and chaos, I think. And I think purpose without growth creates stagnation. And I think real leadership, that's um, where real leadership lives in that balance. But I think scaling with purpose is growing mostly without losing your soul and really treating people well, learning as you go, using that learning to make better decisions, be healthier. Um, I know when I was growing to when we were growing our toy company, I lost myself in terms of things that make me me, my hobbies, the things that I enjoy doing, spending time with the kids, uh, being healthy, eating healthy, getting enough sleep. Those are all things that are hard to do when you're going through that phase. But if you can, I think that's what that looks like for me.
That's a beautiful answer and a very measured and reflective answer. Just on that, I mean, you have started, scaled, and sold, I think, six businesses. I mean, you've been on the trenches, and those who are listening will resonate strongly with what you've just said. You know, part of your journey, and actually, whenever you were growing your businesses, scaling wasn't even a thing, and that was the same for me. It's just entered the business lexicon, and now it's very
Right.
sexy. In the last kind of decade, it's become very popular, but it wasn't a thing. Our purpose now is to free leaders to flourish,
I love
so
that.
that they don't lose their soul, they don't lose themselves along the way. What advice would you give to leaders reflecting back now if you were to begin scaling another business again in the morning? What would you be very careful not to do? What would be non-negotiable for you, but that would still allow you to scale successfully?
I think you just said the word. I didn't have any non-negotiables. Honestly, I mean, I was actually talking to somebody about that last night. I didn't have any non-negotiables. Like I said, I gave up my health routine. I gave up, going out and um, I love to sail. I love to be on the water. Um, I'm a pretty active person, but I gave up a lot of that to the business. I gave up spending time with the kids and the family. I gave that up for the business. Um, I also gave up eating really well, gave that up for the business because I had to be on the road, right? Um, and so I would have those as non-negotiables, right? If you're a person of faith, I mean, you give up your spiritual practices, you give up your meditation, you give up like I gave up everything almost. And I thought I had to have that 20 hours a day in the business to make it work. And what I realize now is that extra 6, 8 hours a day that I was spending in the business that I could have been doing something else, like resting, eating well, exercising, spending time with family, would have actually made me make better decisions. But I mean, maybe that just comes with age and gray hair. I don't know, but like that's what I would tell. That's what I tell people now. Like, have non-negotiables and stick to them, because the same problems are going to be there tomorrow.
So
You know?
profound. What's coming up for me is ensuring that your non-negotiables, I think of alliteration here, your family, your faith, your fitness, and
Mm,
your fun in terms of
mm,
your hobbies. Ensure that you've got
mm.
those ring fenced in your week and build everything else around that. So I love that. I love your
And
honesty in
here,
that, Red.
here's the thing. I love the way you said. I love the way you put that, man. You've got a way with words. But I would also have an accountability partner because I know myself. Like I like to solve the problems of the challenge I'm trying to, do with the business. The other thing I tell people now is have somebody that will pull you out and say, hey, it's time for you to walk out of the office, and that computer stays there, right? Have an accountability partner to like help you do that because I'm not strong enough to do that on my own. So I have to have somebody that like plays that role for me, right? Like
We're
calls
go-
me out.
we're going to you've challenged me there for a fifth F. So a figurehead by virtue of a coach or mentor, accountability buddy to
Love it.
ensure that you're
Love it.
staying on track with your non-negotiables. Brilliant. Look, I want to congratulate you. I have just finished reading your wonderful book. For those who are listening, you won't be able to see me holding up uh, Rhett's new book, which he has co-authored with Susie Burke and Ryan Berman, called Headamentals. Love the title, by the way. Well done. I
Thank
have absolutely devoured this book. Something that struck me when I read it, I interviewed way back, it's a number of years ago now, the wonderful Dr. Jim Lear, who was founded the Human Performance Institute, has written like almost 20 books. One of those is The Power of Full Engagement. And there's a line that he delivered during that podcast, and it's stuck with me ever since. And it's the quality of your life will be determined by the tone and content of your inner voice. And that's really stuck with me. And your book just explores this at such a deep level. I was so delighted that when I first heard that you were writing this, that actually somebody was digging deep into this. Ultimately, you deal with this uncomfortable truth that most leaders are battling conversations in their own heads that nobody else can see. What I'm curious about is what brought this to light for you, and why did you want to write a book about it?
A lot of reasons. Number one, it's something I've, dealt with in my own businesses and my own leadership and really understanding myself as a human being and as a leader and as a founder and a parent and everything else that we are and people challenging me to dig deeper to understand my coaches and my mentors making me reflect and reflect on things that I've done or not done or on how to get better. And so it's came from self-reflection. It came from the when I started coaching 12 years ago now. And I mean, and being in Marshall Goldsmith's world and in that 100 coaches group where people challenge you and they don't mind challenging you on your stuff. It came from all of that. I mean, it wasn't just one thing, but it did start out as a something I recognized in my coaching that leaders are dealing with. And so I gave a keynote probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, and that turned in ultimately into this book. And I brought Ryan in and Dr. Burke in because they're inspired colleagues and they had seen the same kind of thing in their own practices and in their own consulting practices and in their own life. And so we decided to collaborate on it. And Ryan and I kind of brought the leadership angle, and Dr. Burke brought the science. We thought it was a really important conversation to have in our businesses because it's not being had. And if you truly want to build a culture where people are engaged, where people love to come to work, where you have a got your back culture, not a watch your back culture, then these are conversations we have to have. And I know that's not in a lot of ways. This isn't a this is seemed as sort seems sort of soft and kind of one of these topics that people don't want to talk about today because we're sort of feeling like we're in a command. We're back to the whole like you know leadership has all the leverage and you do what you're told to do. But I think for leaders who want to build really good organizations and who really want to survive in the world that we're in right now, right? With all the technology changes and the cultural changes and challenges, I think we have to be thinking about how do we survive? How do we thrive in the chaos that is right now and not knowing what tomorrow is going to look like. So I think the more we can do for our people and the more we can um, do for ourselves, then I think we're going to have better teams and better organizations that can survive anything and thrive. So that's why we did it. It was a 7 year labor of love. It was hard to write. It was hard to understand it. It was hard to we had to dig deep. We had to get over our own self-talk and our own internal differences on what this meant. But it was great. It was a great exercise for our own leadership, our own individually, and then I hope and what I'm seeing now is it's helping people uh, create better organizations and better teams.
It's so well written. And I didn't appreciate it took you 7 years. It speaks directly to the very first principle of our own 10 principle Scale X framework, which is psyche. For those who are regular listeners to the show, then they will have heard me say before that your psyche will either empower your scaling trajectory because it acts like a multiplier, or it will disempower and impede your scaling potential. You guys dive deep into this. Before we get into it, how much of what was written resonates directly with your own experience whenever you were on your business scaling journey? What really stood out for you in terms of, yeah, that was me. That's how I felt. This was a constant battle for me in my own head.
I think we write the book that we need, right? And I, I mean, I wish we'd have written it, when, before we were, trying to start businesses and that phase of our life wasn't over. But hey, anyway, we
I
live and
always
learn.
say the same about our own book, Rhett. Yeah. It was the book that we needed at the time.
That's right. Um, but I'm pleased that it could help people in that phase. And so sure, I mean, these are all we felt all of these emotions. We felt all of these inadequacies. I wasn't an MBA student. I wasn't, I mean, I studied history and I studied politics. I studied people, right? And I didn't know what you know, I don't know, a cost analysis was. I didn't know what, a pro forma, or I didn't know any of that stuff, right? I had to learn all that stuff. But I knew people and I thought I could, I actually ended up being pretty good at the product stuff. I learned what, a balance sheet was. I learned what, all of those things I had to learn. But, uh, and then it was the first time where there were high stakes. I mean, I had worked and managed a lot of people. I was successful corporately, but the stakes were higher when it's yours and you've got to make payroll, right? And all of those things. We felt there were moments where you question every decision you made. Why did I give up a great career to now not being able to make payroll? I don't know where payroll is going to come from next week, right? Where every crisis is a business killer, and there were business killer moments, and where you just want to kind of curl up on the corner in the office and cry, right? Um, but you get through it and you grow and you get stronger. And I didn't realize at the time that some of that anxiety was bleeding off into my own team, right? And that's the I think the biggest realization for us was that, the way that Peter, who was my business partner, and I were, some of that anxiety and that stress and that uh, the things that we were feeling and bled into the way we acted, bled into the way we led, bled into the how people felt. So they must have been terrified. If we were absolutely terrified, they must have been terrified. And we know that that happens now. We know that that's the case now.
Yeah,
And
of course. People, I mean, ultimately, people will feel the leader's energy. And what I'm hearing from you, to pick up the language that you've used in the book, the fact that you weren't from a business background, what I'm hearing and what it suggests is that you felt like an imposter at different times in the business
sure.
setting. That at times, at difficult times, kind of, will we meet payroll? You maybe we're overthinking and catastrophizing the
Yep.
potential impact of that. So, we have language on this now that at the time, and I mean, this resonates so strongly. You don't have this language at the time, which is why it's wonderful to have this platform to bring this and socialize this language and this situation for others. You personify what you've described or what you've related to just earlier as the monster in our heads,
Mhm.
and which is the disempowering negative self-talk. Of course, the empowering part, the empowering voice is what you share or what you describe as the Maverick, and I love that. And what I'd love to do today is a little mini masterclass to for help our listeners to understand the monster, because we all live with this monster, but how do we tame the monster and certainly be more maverick more of the time? Because from a scaling perspective, I shared with you at the outset, less than 1% of small and medium enterprise leaders are actually achieving scale. And I strongly believe that when we can support them and actually being in the maverick more often than being in the monster, then actually the potential to scale is significant. So um, let's speak about the monster. What characterizes the monster? You call out in your book kind of five monster archetypes, five monster personas.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Well, let's start by, talking about what the monster is and the Maverick, who they are. And we started this journey thinking about all of this and how do we create language around this, and how do we create language that people get, right, that makes sense and is not overly scientific and overly science speak. Um and so that was a that took a while to sort of figure out what we were doing. But look, I think um there are a couple things to think about. The monster. We can't conquer it. We thought early on that we were going to conquer the monster. And what we learned was, the monster is going to be with you. That's a lifelong partner, right? And this is about having better conversations with the monster. It's not about conquering the self-talk. It's not about getting rid of it. It's not about sort of quieting the voice. That the voice is there, it's really to protect you, and that's a good thing, right? You need that voice that, when you're walking out in the middle of the street and a car's coming, you need that voice that says, "Hey, get out of the road, stupid." Um, you need that voice sometimes when you're doing something that is dangerous, and it's there to protect you, and to understand that it's there to protect you. That's the other thing. It's not there to harm you. It's not there to, to stop you from being successful, but it's there to protect you from things that could hurt you. And that goes back to when we were prehistoric and lived in caves and we didn't want to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger that was outside, right? So that's an important thing to know, that it's actually there to protect you. And this is really all about having better conversations with that voice so that it doesn't get in the way of you doing something that might be scary, but that might change your life, that something that you want to do, we just don't want it to hold you back from doing something that you can do, that you can do successfully. So that's the thing. We do want you to live more in the Maverick. We do want you to have, because when you live more with the Maverick, life is better. You get to do things that you dreamed about doing, and it gives you that ability to do that. Um, so that's the balance, and that's I think the starting point for that conversation. Now, you asked about the archetypes. Well, um, there are archetypes. There are things that we call cognitive distortions. So I don't know where do you want to begin, because there are things that fuel the monster. We can talk about that, or we can talk about, the catastrophizer. We can talk about the different things.
Well, I always feel that, awareness precedes understanding, understanding precedes change. And you talk about it in the book, name it to tame it. So, you take the lead on this, Red, in
Okay.
terms of, in the context of giving our listeners and providing our listeners with an understanding of what to look out for, um, what the monster might sound like, how the monster might show up. I
Yeah.
feel that's really important to understand. Look, in this situation, you're about to make a big decision. Be
Yep.
mindful that your monster, and I almost feel like I've just come from a walk with my German Shepherd. My German Shepherd wants to take the lead all of the time. And that's not a good thing, especially when we see another dog.
Right.
I love walking with her, and she's a wonderful companion and a great guard dog. But context is really important. So I don't want her pulling on. We want to know when does our monster? Because it sounds to me like the monster is a wonderful servant, but a horrible master. When it's serving us, it's protecting us. It's wanting to, it's wanting to support us, but it doesn't always know the context. So it's rearing up every time. So on that basis, let's just go into a few situations in a business scaling context where the monster's going to rear its head and where we actually need to ensure it's on the leash.
Yeah, we know we talked about earlier. You mentioned you brought in imposter syndrome. That's one that I think we've all had. I was I had it last week when I was in Davos, and I was in the room with five or six heads of state, and we're having this conversation, and I'm facilitating, and you just pinch yourself sometimes and say, wow, I'm in this room and uh, you have to remind yourself that you've done the work to get in this room. You've done the work to be asked to be in this room. And but sometimes you have those moments that you're just thinking, wow, am I really here? Do I deserve to be here? Can I, can I hang? Can I, contribute to this conversation? One of the things that we talk a lot about is overthinking. A lot of people suffer from this, and they want to, and what it does is it slows down decision making, it slows down the process, it creates bottlenecks, and it gets in the way of moving at the speed that we have to move at because we're not sure. We ask every possible question 15 times and in 15 different ways. And uh, when the decision was pretty clear to begin with, but we overthink it. Um, Self-handicapping. We all know, we all have leaders and friends that we know that handicap themselves, right? They get in their own way, right? They delay a decision, or they do something that gets in the way of them doing what they need to do. Uh, and we do this all the time because there's probably a mix of the imposter syndrome or overthinking in that, but self-handicapping is how it manifests itself a lot. The other thing that we do that is probably not something you really have thought about in this context, but confirmation bias is a self-talk. This is one of the things that is a monster fuel, is kind of, we confirm, we say something to ourselves like, well, it didn't work before, it's not going to work this time, or, that team always, a great example. I'm coaching a team now. I've been coaching this in this organization for about 3 years. We did an engagement survey with them on their teams. This team was the lowest performing team. And we came into a meeting, and the manager said to her team, guys, we just scored the lowest of anybody in the organization. And I guess it just confirms that what we all know, we're the worst team. And you just saw the energy come out of that room by it just deflated everybody. In fact, two people left the following week. They resigned. And when she could have walked in that room and said, hey team, we've got some work to do, but let's show everybody in this organization what we're made of. Let's By the next engagement survey, let's turn it around. Let's be the best team. And this is how we're going to do it. And how do you think we could do it? And instead of using it as fuel for change and fuel to get better, and for her to get better as a leader, you know, she just confirmed what everybody thought and what they all thought of themselves, and she just reconfirmed it. And so we do that all the time. And then we avoid decisions, we avoid having tough conversations, and I'm a nice person. I don't want to say that to that person. So it manifests itself in a lot of ways. And and you can see where over time how that, as a leader in an organization and as a team leader or a founder or CEO, what happens and where that takes an organization's culture and performance.
I want to come to that. Before I do, though, just to kind of recap on what I've heard in terms of or this, not how it shows up, but the situations which it's most likely to show up. Situations where you're in a room and you perceive that you're in some way less capable, less intelligent, less accomplished than others, like your experience in Davos last week. It sounds like your monster was very noisy in there. In situations where we are required to make decisions, where the monster will show up as overthinking, overanalyzing, where we are required to have what we perceive as a difficult conversation, maybe with a team member who is not performing as they should be, who is not behaving in line with to our values as they should be. You know, the monster's likely to show up there. The self-handicapping is an interesting one. It sounds like, you know, when we reach almost the ceiling of our own capability, our own competence, then we almost self-sabotage. The monster will be loud
Mhm.
to protect us, maybe exposing ourselves to having to change in some way. So this is
Right.
what I'm hearing. Um, are there any other situations that we need to be aware of, especially in the context of scaling an organization, where the monster's going to be noisy, the self-talk's going to be loud?
Oh, I think it's pretty much everything. Is this product going to work? Is this, are we going to be able to, can we see around the corners of the future to be able to pivot and change like we need to? Uh, I think, am I going to be able to find the right people for this team that I'm building? I mean, I think it shows up in every aspect of trying to grow and scale where you just don't know. And when you don't know, your mind feels the gap of with that uncertainty and with those questions. And those questions, are scary sometimes when you're making choices and you're making decisions. And a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we're making decisions with not all the information, right? We're making our best guess. Now, granted, today we have a lot more data than we used to have, and we have a lot more. I mean, there are a lot more ways now where I could test product versus back then when I actually had to build a prototype and I had to I had to spend the money to test a product. I think there are a lot of ways today you can do that without having to um, do some of the things we used to have to do, but it's still the same. I mean, a lot of there's a lot of uncertainty in entrepreneurship. There's a lot of uncertainty in running a business, and I think it can surround, if you don't have better conversations with yourself, it can surround almost every conversation, every decision, every challenge that you face. So in every context, there's a version of what you just went through and what we just talked about. There's a version of it in there. And and then the ones, I mean, some people, I've got a CEO that, was told by his teachers and his people all around him his whole life that he wasn't that smart, and that was okay. He was a nice guy, and he was polite, and he so he faces every time he does something, he was told his whole life he wasn't that smart. Yet he's built a $100 million business and is doing super well. And you would think that he would now know that um, he's not an idiot. He's not dumb. That he's actually pretty smart. Um, but he still faces that. He still gets that in his head, and it challenges him. And then he has to pull back and say, is that narrative really true? Because I've done this successfully a lot. And so on that track record, let's make our decision on that track record, not the old record and the old tape that from my childhood that keeps playing in my head. Let's make it on the new recording that says, "Hey, I can do this." And I think that's we have a lot of different record. We have a bunch of old tape in our head, and it's from traumas and experiences all along. And so those can come up too, not just the business ones, right? It's the personal ones, it's the relationship ones that get us too.
So, and interestingly, as you were citing that example, very recently we have just onboarded another two cohorts into our 12-month ScaleX Accelerator program, and we see this year in, year out. Actually, dyslexia is quite consistent amongst entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs from a certain age group, certainly over 40, were told, it almost seems consistent by teachers who didn't understand dyslexia, that actually they wouldn't amount to anything. And we had one incredible entrepreneur last week who said to me, he said, I was almost not going to come today. Everything in my body wanted me to turn the Jeep away and to drive back home. I don't feel that I belong in this room. No, within half an hour of being there, at the break, he was saying, "Oh, I'm so glad I stayed. This is my room. These are my people," and so it was wonderfully refreshing. But
Yeah.
everything in his head was telling him that he shouldn't be in that room. Classic imposter syndrome. And as I say, we see this time and time again, especially those entrepreneurs, and there are quite a number of them who are dyslexic.
And
And
ADHD. I mean, I have the worst ADHD in the world, and we were told the same kind of stuff.
yeah.
You can't pay attention, you can't focus, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, I was bored. Not that I couldn't do it, I was just bored with you.
Yeah, it hasn't worked out too badly, Rhett. So let's use and let's explore the 3C method to
Mhm.
move to share with our listeners how they can actually tame the monster and be more maverick in the context of ensuring that they're more consistently
Yeah.
empowered when they're making the decisions. So the 3Cs, the first C, you talk about catching it. Uh, Tell us more about what this means.
Yeah, so we tried to put a simple framework around this. This sounds simple. Catch it, confront it, change it. Sounds super simple, but it's super hard, right? And like what is the old adage? You have to acknowledge a problem before you can solve a problem or something like that. I don't know if that comes from AA or I don't know where that comes from, but um, so our belief is that you've got to learn. And we talked about Davos. You said, hey, it sounds like you had a lot of monsters in your head. They came up, but was able to quiet them very quickly because I know the narrative. I know the right narrative in that conversation is that I've done the work and I've been in those rooms before, and I know I have something to say that people should listen to. And so, I'm able to change those narratives pretty quick now. But it's because of this 3C method that really helps. And the first is catch it. And what I mean by catch it is when we play that old tape in our brain, when we start having those negative conversations, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not good enough. Uh, I'm not talented enough. I'm not the most talented or smartest person in this room. Whatever those things are, when we recognize those, that's the catching part of it. We learn to hear that and know that we're saying these things. And what I tell people to do, for the next month is write those things down. Take a little journal with you, a little notebook. And when you have one of those thoughts, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, write it down. And here's an interesting fact. We have 6,200 thoughts a day, and 5,000 of them or more are negative or repetitive. And I don't know what that adds up to. I think let me do some quick math in my brain. That's 80% or negative, 150,000 negative thoughts a month. And I think it's 1.8 million, if did my math right, negative thoughts a year. Um, I mean, that's destructive, right? That's destructive. So learning to catch those things, and when you have those, and put a tick mark next to it if it's repetitive. And then what you start recognizing is this pattern. If you are disciplined enough to do that for a month or more, so that you just begin to instantly recognize those things, then you're on the way to changing the habits and those thoughts and being able to have better conversations with yourself. Because in the next phase, where we confront those and we start confronting those narratives, you start asking yourself, well, like my coaching client does he was told he was stupid or not smart. You know, He's now at the stage where he just confronts that old narrative and says, you know what? Based on my success and the many times I've done that thing, I've done it successfully. And I know I can do it successfully if I do this, this, and this, or I make, these decisions. And he's changed that old narrative that used to get in his way of making those decisions and pulling the trigger on a product or a service or, running his business. And he now knows that those narratives aren't true. They're just not true.
So
And yeah.
it's understanding that this voice is showing up. You become aware of it, you catch it, you write it down. There will be patterns. There will be repetitive negative self-talk here. The monster's fairly predictable in the way it will show up. You confront it, essentially calling it out, and then you change it by offering evidence to the contrary.
Mhm.
And there will always be what I'm suspecting here, always evidence to the contrary in the context of what the monster is purporting as being something that you're not capable of.
Well, but yeah, yes, but there's also sometimes where you did fail at a thing that you're taking on again. Like this shows up in business a lot. Um, it, it's not always that you succeeded at it or you've conquered that thing, but you're acknowledging that yes, you failed, but it doesn't mean that you're going to fail this time. It doesn't mean you're going to fail or that you're going to have the same result. It just means that you don't let it get in the way of still doing that tough thing that you may have to do or that you may need to do. And it's an awareness that you shouldn't do it based on the narrative in your head. You should do it based on the information you have in the business, the information you have to make a decision on. It should be made based on what you have to do as in the business or in a relationship or in a whatever the context is, and not out of the fear of the because it didn't work before.
Yeah, and again, what I'm here is presented with a reframe. So rather than accepting I am a failure, it's actually acknowledging that yes, this might be deemed a failure, but actually it's feedback, and we're going to take the feedback from that learning experience and do something differently this time off the back of that learning. And actually,
Right.
what this experience is telling me is that I am resilient, I am persistent, I am curious to learn more. So you're offering the monster different narrative and affirming different narrative, as opposed to
Right.
letting the kind of I am a failure take seed. Now, this all sounds wonderful for us to kind of riff back and forth in the context of this setting. But when you're in the middle of a kind of high stakes situation, Rhett, how should we how what would we notice, maybe even from a physiological perspective, about how the monster's going to present itself?
That's a great question, and that's one that I hadn't put a lot of thought into this, and it's one of the things that Dr. Burke brought to this was the how that manifests itself sometimes, how that anxiety manifests itself. I mean, people have different triggers when and different emotions and different way, physically the way these things show up or uh and so I don't have a concrete answer to you, but we all know when we have anxiety or when we're nervous about something and we all know that I don't know that we spend a lot of time thinking about it, but we all know when we have those feelings, when we're about to make a big decision or have a tough conversation, what it's doing in our body. Like we all know that. Sometimes we ignore it, but we all have those things that how we react and how we, if we're nervous or uh, about something. We all have those, and I think everybody's got different thing. The way it manifests is different. I know it in my gut. Um,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. I was 22 or 23 and I was going to get engaged to somebody I had been dating for a few years. And I was physically sick. Like I was balled over in a, like my stomach was hurt so bad. I couldn't even get out of the bed. I was in this little ball, right? And what was that telling me? That my body was telling me this is a bad decision. You know, I had the ring in my hand and it was like, this is a bad decision. And my mind wasn't letting me do the right thing. So my body had to step in and say, hey, hold on, don't do this. Right. Uh, I think we all have those things that we feel. And I think that was your question. If
Absolutely. I mean, I'm curious to understand, without making assumptions, when we're making difficult decisions, and certainly I wear an aura, you'll
yeah.
see maybe your
Yeah,
HR.
I've got
There
yeah.
we go. You've got your whoop, likely your HRV is going to
Yep,
reflect the fact that you're putting your body under significant stress in the context of
yep,
this decision. If you're overthinking, if you're overanalyzing, that kind of awakening moment at 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever your monster's trying to kind of shake you out of your sleep and tell you, no, no, you need to be thinking more about this. So your heart rate's going to rise. Maybe, if it's prolonged, it's going to impact your blood pressure. All of those things, which, it brings me to think about that little fable where you've a little boy and he's sitting with his grandpa, and the grandpa's coaching him on the kind of difference between right and wrong, and the little guy is curious about, why are there bad people in the world, grandpa? And he says, well, actually, we all have the ability to be bad, but we've also the ability to be very, very good. In fact, we live with two wolves. There's two wolves on our shoulders, and one's a bad wolf and the other's a good wolf. And for some people, the bad wolf wins out, and for others, the good wolf wins out. Well, how can I make sure my good wolf wins out over the bad wolf? Well, that's the one you feed the most. And what I'm hearing in all of this, in the context of kind of the monster versus the maverick, is understand that we're living with both. You can't eradicate the monster, but actually it's being careful not to feed it. Acknowledge that it's there, but don't feed it, because the cost of feeding it is significant. And you've referenced it throughout, Rhett, and I want to come to this. So, what is the cost of feeding the monster, of letting the monster take hold here for ourselves as leaders, for our
mhm.
teams, and ultimately the culture that we want to create, and which is important to create and to be definite about, that is required for scaling. So, what's the cost?
Yeah, that's the question, right? And I want to go back real quick because once you to catch it, confront it, change it. So changing that narrative, once you can learn to catch it and then confront the stories, then you can start to automatically, almost in a lot of ways, you've changed that habit of letting the fear, which is what this is, the fear dictate how you lead and how you operate. Um, Instead of letting it be informative, you let it guide, you let it be in charge, right? And I think that's the catch it, confront it, change it, is you want to be able to lead, be the leader and not let the fear lead you. And that's the ultimate takeaway there from the 3C method. To your question, look, the impact is massive. Uh, if we don't talk about this in our organizations and our relationships, our marriages, our partnerships, if we don't talk about self-talk and what we're dealing with, the cost is massive. Look, there's productivity, and let's put it in a business context. Uh, you lose productivity, you lose engagement, you have higher retention or a loss of employees. There's a direct ROI to this. And I think I said earlier about building a culture that's a got your back culture, not a watch your back culture. Uh, the reason teams, I coached a couple years ago. I coached a player at Barcelona on the business side, but I coach a lot of athletes. And the difference between a championship team or a world-class athlete, they're all, if you're running in the Olympics or if you're running in the World Cup or if you're playing at, Manchester United or you're playing at the, Seattle Seahawks or the in NFL or NBA, it doesn't matter. If you're at that level, you're world class. Like you're the top 1% of all people in that sport, probably the top, whatever. Like it's rare. Um, and the reason those people are successful is because they recover from mistakes fast, right? They don't overthink a mistake or a failure. They recover, they're resilient. They have great self-talk. They've learned to manage the conversations. They have more of the Maverick operating than the monster. And that's why they're able to succeed at a world-class level like that. And if you want to build a team that is a world-class team that is resilient, that can get over the challenges that we face today, uh, and really operate well, this is one of the fundamental conversations this is one of the fundamental things you've got to do. It's the missing piece in the culture conversation. It's the missing piece to having a great benefits package and a great dining room and all the other things that we try to do as leaders to create a great place to work. But if we don't have it between our ears, if we don't have that straight as leaders, and we don't help our teams have that straight or as much as they can, uh, then we're still not going to have a great culture and we're not going to have a great team. And so to me, that's the essence of the importance of this for me was in my coaching and seeing what I've seen and my other co-authors have seen in their practices, that if you're brave enough and have enough courage as a leader to have these conversations with your teams and your exec teams and lead with this as in top of mind, then you can do anything in business. You can do anything that you want to do, what you're trying to do, and you'll do it well, and you'll thrive.
Practically, what would you recommend our listeners to do in terms of actually introducing this uh, to our teams? Because it sounds to me like the leader themselves, if they're coming to this for the first time, will have quite a bit of work to do to get comfortable with this in the context of leading themselves first before they introduce it to other team members. But what do you practically recommend, Rhett?
Yeah, I think it starts by asking better questions. Why did we, if you're talking about a sales team or a product team, why did this fail? Where did we make a mistake? Where did we have blind spots? What got in our way here? And this is not about blame and things, but it's about what slowed us down, what got in our way. Asking better questions about and more open questions about as a team, did we have groupthink on this? What did we miss? You know, and and then what was our self-talk around what is our team talk around this? Where did we, you know, go wrong? Where did we think that we had this, settled? Um, what should we have thought? What can we do differently next time when we do this? You know, can we roll this product back out and make these changes? And is that, so I think it's about asking better questions and more questions and digging deeper into what happened or what's going on, what's getting in our way of doing what we want to accomplish. And I think that's where it starts. And then uh, I think Headamentals is a good way to start talking about introducing the idea is self-talk getting in the way. We did a team uh, retreat a couple of weeks ago with a team. It was really interesting. They were willing to dive into the personal, right? What gets in my way at work? What are my, what am I doing that is this old narrative that I'm operating, my operating system? I mean, self-talk is an operating system if you want to think about it in that terms, but it's a business operating system. It's either really positive or it's not. But yeah, I think I was surprised at how open they are to talk about their own things. And what that did was it brought the team together. When they knew a little bit more about each other and they had that vulnerability, uh, it made them a stronger, more resilient team. And uh, I was pleasantly surprised by that there wasn't this, oh, now I've got something to hold over you kind of thing. It was, yeah, we knew that all along. You just voiced it, but we all see that. We all saw that in you anyway. Like, and it made those people feel safe and heard and understood. But people had already recognized those traits in those individuals and the traits in themselves when those came out. So I think teams are more willing to talk about this stuff than you think.
Yeah, and what you've described there, I can imagine that this would really cement an already strong bond in an already strong culture. I can't imagine anyone addressing this or wanting to be vulnerable to open up the and reveal the monster in their head in a culture where they already don't feel safe. So I can
Yeah,
see this being
correct.
absolute rocket fuel for those cultures that are already strong.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, actually. My feed, my YouTube, my phone must have been listening to a conversation I was having with my wife. She was asking me yesterday about the book that I was reading, and this morning when I was at the gym, there was a YouTube short came up with Novak Djokovic
Oh yeah.
addressing this exact topic as somebody had spoken to him about how he has consistently been at the top, and what goes on whenever he loses a point. He says it's like this. He said, uh, everyone who plays this game, everyone who's in business, everyone who's in sport has negative self-talk. He said it's just that I've learnt over years of consistent practice how to tame my negative self-talk. So you've brought the method to this, Rhett. Before we move into the close, is there anything that you feel is important to address that we haven't touched on?
Um, I just think pick the book up and give it a read and or listen to the Audible. And think about how what your team how your team is operating, how you're leading. I think just giving this a little bit of thought will give you some ideas on how you can do it better and how you can make your team stronger. And I don't know anyone, whether you're in a corporate situation or an entrepreneur, that doesn't want their team to be just a little bit better. And I think uh, if you do that, and apply some of these principles, you're going to change. It's going to get better. You're going to have a better time. You're going to have more fun, and you're going to be more successful. And I think that's it. I think the book can help. I know we all suffer or have some of us have better self-talk than others, but I think just think about your people and think about making it better for them because right now they're struggling. You know,
He,
if you're struggling with it, they're definitely struggling with it. So.
Great advice, and staying on the theme of giving great advice, given the fact that you have stood in the shoes of our listeners, you've been in the trenches of starting, building, scaling businesses, you've coached some of the highest performing athletes, business leaders across the globe. You're surrounded by the wonderful Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches folk. I mean, you have so much experience and wisdom to share. Can you share with our audience three timeless takeaways?
Wow. Um, yeah. I think clarity inside kind of, I think clarity inside creates momentum outside. Um, I think self-talk shapes behavior and behavior shapes culture would be something I would leave. And somebody told me this a really long time ago, but you don't lead from the inside, or you don't lead from your title, you lead from your internal state. And it took me a long time to figure out what that internal state, what he meant by that. But that's what self-talk is, right? If you can lead from that, if you can have that internal clarity, then and that internal peace and that internal uh, calmness, then you know you can lead better. And so that's it. That's what I'd leave.
So, so profound. Tell me, sir, what is next for you? You've come from Davos. You've only recently launched the book. What's next on the horizon?
We want to make this part of the conversation when we talk about culture, and I want to get this in leaders' hands and have these conversations with corporate leaders and founders so that they can make their organizations better. Look, I mean, we're in this seminal moment in society, right? And there's so much profound change happening, and the more we can do to calm the inner voice of ourselves and our people, the better. And so that's what's next. So we're going to continue being part of that conversation, starting those conversations. That's why we're on the road show doing the talks and getting on stage and uh, talking about it wherever we can. I appreciate you sharing your platform with me so that we could have this conversation, and that's what we're continuing to do. I'll be next week. I'll be in Qatar, and we're going global, and we're telling everybody that'll listen. So.
Amazing. Well, it's wonderful, wonderful work. I urge everyone who is listening to go and pick up a copy of your book, Rhett. You're coming to this from a place of lived experience. It's not. It's this isn't academia. You know, you've lived this. You've walked this. You know the importance of this, and clearly you want to serve others in navigating this, so that ultimately they realize their full potential and not be subservient to the monster that's currently living with them. I wish you every success with it. I've loved this conversation today.
Thank you.
This is a passion of mine, I have to say, and to really understand the psychology of leaders and ultimately give leaders any little performance advantage which is going to support them in scaling with purpose, because ultimately when they do, they create this incredible ripple effect that serves not only themselves, their teams, their organizations, their communities, but society and economies at large. So good luck, continued good luck with everything you're doing. If people want to find out a little bit more, read about you, about your work, how best to get in touch?
I appreciate that. You can at rhettpower.com, headamentals.com. I'm on. All you have to do is go on LinkedIn and connect with me and follow, and let's have a dialogue. Happy to answer questions, and we're out there. We're pretty easy to find, but yeah, please do join us on social and let's have a conversation. And we're happy to come to your organization and help your team operationalize this.
Brilliant. Well, look, keep up the good work, my friend. Enjoy Qatar. It's an incredible place.
Yes, it is.
Lots of fond memories from my time in
Yeah.
Qatar.
Yeah.
So look, enjoy all of that, and I look forward to staying in touch. Take care.
Thank you, man.